Tonight, we are back in our study on It's Not Too Late. And, we've talked about a couple different people so far. We talked about Moses and his faults, and the fact that even though he murdered the Egyptian, even though he tried his best to get out of it and made excuses, God still used him in a mighty way. Then we talked about Rahab, who was a harlot, who was a prostitute, who most people wouldn't give the time of day to, but yet God used her and allowed her to even be a part of Jesus' lineage, and spoke about her many times throughout the Bible and even up into the New Testament, even made her way into the Hall of Fame of Faith chapter in Hebrews chapter 11. So we've seen several people that God has used that did not seem like people that we would have used. And I've seen skits over the years, and one was, it was about people applying for a job as pastor of a church. And one of them was David. He came and he applied for the job of pastor, and they wouldn't take him because he had a extramarital affair and was responsible for killing somebody, and they wouldn't take him. They wouldn't take Abraham because he had lied about Sarah. They wouldn't take, and the thing is that there's so many people in the Bible that they wouldn't take the Apostle Paul. They wouldn't take Peter. There's so many people that we can pick a flaw out of anybody. And and that's the way we look at things a lot of times. But God looks at people in different ways. And the one that we're going to talk about tonight is one that I still, I wonder. You wonder, why, God, did you use this person? And I don't know about you all, but I'm one of those kind that I don't like to lie. I just don't. I don't like to feel sneaky or feel like I'm doing anything. It makes me feel bad, and that's why that they have the lie detectors for most people. When we tell a lie, our heart will quicken a little bit. Even if we don't notice it, our palms will start to sweat. We get a little nervous when we start to lie. But there are people out there that I would consider professional liars. They're just sneaky. They're cheats. They lie about everything. And there's one particular. There's three different people that I've known over my lifetime and a couple of them are old. Well, one's passed away now, but he was a businessman here in Johnson City for years and years and years. One still is a businessman here in Johnson City and has been for years and years, and some of y'all know him well. I'm not going to mention any names, but it seems like they would rather lie to you than to tell you the truth. Have anybody ever known somebody like that? I mean, if you ask them, if they pulled up in a white car and they came in and you said, well, what color car did you get? And they'd say, well, it was blue. Just for no reason. They just feel, some people, it's just like they just have to lie to you. Or they always feel like they have to get the better of you. One of these guys that I'm talking about in particular wanted to do some business with my dad, and my dad said, no, I don't, I'd rather not have your business. Or one of his guys that came into our store and wanted to buy some stuff, and Dad just told him, said, no, I would really just rather not have your business. Well, when he run into the guy later, the guy said, I heard that you don't like me. He said, oh no, I like you. You're the most likable fella I know. I just don't want to do business with you because you're gonna always try to get me some way. And I've known a lot of people that are that way. And the problem with lying is, once you tell a lie or once you deceive somebody, you've got to try to remember what you lied about, how you deceived them, because it's going to come back. And some of the people I know, they're professionals at it. They can just keep going and going and going. And but to me, that would just wear me out. I couldn't handle it. But I know a lot of people that are like that. I've known a lot of them in business. One in particular that's just a couple years older than me, and he's a guy that works for me. It was his best friend from elementary school, and he tried to take advantage of him on anything they tried to trade on. Anytime they tried to, he'd always try to get the better of somebody, and for that reason, the guy that works for me won't even hardly talk to him anymore, because he always feels like he's trying to cheat him. And some people, and when people do that, when I know that somebody is like that, I don't want to do business with them. I don't want to have anything to do with them. I like them. I'll be friendly to them. But when it comes down to doing business or trading in anything, I just have no desire to. I don't want to. And that is the way that I think that most of us would have felt or would feel if we were doing business with Jacob. Jacob in the Bible his name was supplanter or deceiver. That's what his name was when he was born. He was a deceiver. And everything that he did, basically in life, was a means of besting somebody or getting the better of somebody or doing, cheating somebody in some way. And that's all the accounts that we have of him in the Bible are that way. Matter of fact, Genesis chapter 25, we see him with his brother. Now, from the day that they were born, or actually from before they were born, Rebekah was told, "You have two nations within you, and the older will serve the younger," which is not the way that it typically would work out in a family. But in Genesis 25 and verse 27, it starts out, it says, "So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in the tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, 'Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary.' Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, 'Sell me your birthright as of this day.' And Esau said, 'Look, I am about to die, so what is this birthright to me?' Then Jacob said, 'Swear to me as of this day.' So he swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright." Now I've heard this scripture preached in many different ways, and I've heard a lot of people say that Jacob cheated Esau out of this birthright or stole it from him. I think that's might be a little harsh, because Esau was so willing to give it up. To Esau, the birthright didn't mean a lot. Now, what did a birthright mean? Basically, here's monetarily, the way it would work out is, if you had two children, then your estate would be divided into three. The older one would get 2 portions, the younger would get 1. So the oldest son would get a double portion of what everybody else would get. If you had 5 sons, you would actually get divided into 6, the older one getting 2 portions. So for Jacob, this meant an extra third of Isaac's possessions. Now we know that Isaac was not a poor man. He was a fairly rich man of the day. He had lands, he had lots of cattle, he had lots of sheep, he had lots of servants. He He had a large household. And so therefore it meant that he would get a double portion. But besides the monetary thing, what you got, or what happened is that you became the head of the house. You became the head of the family. And basically Jacob would have also been like a servant. He would have answered to Esau had Esau retained his birthright. And it was a status thing. And from the way I gather it and the way I see it, Esau was the kind of guy that he would rather be out in the fields. He would rather be out hunting than sitting at the tent anyway. And basically he would have become boss over all of the people, all of the servants, all of the lands, all the livestock. He would have had to been in charge of it, which would have made him have to spend more time there. He would have had to spend more time. But Esau was the kind that would rather be out and not dealing with those kind of things. So we see that Esau wasn't really that interested in it. He might have been exaggerating a little bit in the fact that he said, if you don't give me, I'm going to die if I don't get something to eat. He made it home. He made it back to the tent, so he probably was being a little dramatic about that. But the thing that we see here is the lack of compassion of Jacob. The lack of compassion for Jacob, and the desire for power, the desire for things, the desire for the extra portion, the desire for the status of being the head of the house. His desire of all of that overtook his love or his compassion for his brother. The thing is, you know, as a brother, you know, there's no way that I would sit and try to steal or try to con my brother out of anything. But even if there was something I wanted that he had, or something that you know, there's no way that I would allow that to become between me and my brother. And I've known a lot of families that have don't speak to each other. I've known a lot and it's I've seen it in my own family, and you know, other parts of my family, that people get mad over inheritance. People get mad over wills. People contest things. People argue about things. People fight over things. And I know that everybody here knows somebody that does not speak to somebody else in their family over something that's some issue, or most of the time it's over an inheritance or a monetary substance. And that's sad. That's sad that anybody would allow anything monetary to come between family. Family's the most important thing you have outside of God. You know, it's God established the family before He established the church. And family's that important, but yet so many people allow things to come between them. And that's what Jacob, he was more concerned with this birthright. He was more concerned with the power and the prestige that came with it than he was concerned about his brother. If my brother said, I need something to eat, I'm going to feed him. For goodness sakes, if a stranger off the street came in and said, I need something to eat, I'm going to feed him. I'm not going to be concerned about what can you give me in return? What can I get out of you? But so many people in this world have that kind of attitude that they're more concerned about how does it benefit me? Anything that I do, I want to know how it's going to benefit me. And that's the attitude that Jacob had here. That, it wasn't about Esau, it was about Jacob and what it did for Jacob. So then we see that when he did this, that drove a wedge between him and Esau. I mean, Esau, it says, from that point he despised his birthright. He hated it, and in doing so he hated Jacob. He just desired to. He lost the desire for being head of the family. He basically hated the family, hated Jacob, hated everything about it, because that he had gave up his birthright. So then we see later, Esau getting, this time he did get cheated, okay? In Genesis chapter 27, and I'm not going to read it all because it takes up 45 verses here, but we all know the story. In Genesis 27, we see that Isaac he's getting old. He's lost his eyesight, and there's not much else, he's not able to get up, he's not able to get around, and basically his simple pleasure is food. And he has a desire for a good meal, and he wanted some venison. He wanted a good venison. I don't know if he wanted a roast or if he wanted some stew. I don't know what he wanted, but he wanted some venison. And Rebekah overheard it. Now, Jacob here is guilty. But Rebekah is just as guilty, okay? Because she has as much desire to see Jacob get this blessing as Jacob does. So we all know the story. While Esau has gone out hunting, he goes out and he does things the hard way. The only way to get true venison is to go out and kill it. So he goes out to kill him a deer. He didn't get as lucky as I could have gotten today. I was up on the backside of Elk or Banner Elk or Beach Mountain, and there was a deer walked up just scraped against the front of my truck, and stood there. I was loading up, and I stood there, and I was as close to him as for me to bugs, and I just stopped, and I had a box in my hand, and he just stood there. He was a spike buck, and he just stood there and looked at me. And I went on and I put the box in the truck, and he just stood there and looked at me. And then he walked around to the other side of the van and just looked at me. And he stood there for a long time. There was two guys over on the other side they were on the other side of the driveway cutting wood, and they stopped, and they were just kind of confused, because he just stood there and looked at me for a long time and then just walked off. If it had been that easy for Esau, he could have got it real easy and quick. But no, he had to go out and hunt the normal way. And for all of you that are hunters, I've never done much hunting, but you know that you can spend days out there in the woods and not see one. We don't know how long it took Esau to go and hunt this deer or this antelope or whatever it was he was out hunting for. But during this time, Jacob went and killed a goat. Now, goat meat and deer meat, they're very, very similar. Very little fat. They're very similar meat. They're both a red meat. And if it's cooked right, you can't tell it apart. And so, of course, his mama put hair on his arms from the goat, on the back of his neck, and he put Esau's clothes on. He took the food. But Isaac hadn't completely lost it. He said, "You smell like Esau. You feel like Esau. But you sound like Jacob." Now he was still sharp enough to know that, but yet he was still fooled, and he was lied to, and he was it was a deceitful way to do things. And he comes to him, and for that reason he gives Jacob the blessing. And then of course we know that Esau came in later, and he comes and he has this. He brings him the food, and Isaac's like, "You've done been here. I've done ate. I'm not hungry now." So he asked him to bless him. He said, I've already blessed Jacob. I can't bless you. I can't give you the same blessing because I've already blessed him." And because of that, we see that Esau gets, at this point, now he's already despising Jacob because of the birthright, but now he's mad. Now he's mad to the point that he says, "When Dad dies, I'm gonna kill you." He's mad to that point, and like I said, I've never understood how brothers and family can get to that point, but it does all the time. And Jacob flees for his life. Rebekah takes him and says, "Go to my brother Laban." Well, when he gets to Laban, you know what? You ever heard the old term, "What comes around goes around"? Well, Jacob goes to Laban. He falls in love with Rachel. He said, "Oh man, she's pretty." And he says, "If you'll let me marry her, I'll work for you for 7 years." 7 years later, he gets tricked, and he gives him Leah. And Leah she wasn't easy on the eye. I don't know what, it don't give us a whole lot of information about her, but we know that she wasn't as easy on the eye as Rachel was. So here he's already gave him 7 years of his life, and he says, okay, you finish out, you're married to Leah, give her the week, and then I'll let you marry Rachel, but you're going to owe me another 7 years. So he basically had 7 whole years of his life stolen from him, that he had to work for Laban in order to get the wife that he desired. And then we see that Laban continues to use him and continues, but then Jacob gets him back. He says, "Okay, well now I'm going to leave, and I'm going to take the family, and I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go back to my homeland." And he says, "As my wage, let me take, you keep all the pure white goats and sheep, and let me take the striped and spotted ones." Now, I've never heard of this happening. I've never heard of this working other than with Jacob, but he took the sticks and he striped the sticks and peeled the bark off sticks and put them in the water, and they had all kinds of striped and spotted sheep and goats. And I don't know how that works out other than the fact that God blessed him. And that's where it gets confusing to me. Not the fact that they had all these spotted and striped animals. The part that gets confusing is, after all that he had done, after the fact that he put himself over his brother, after the fact that he had cheated his brother, after the fact that he had been so deceitful with everybody in his life, why did God choose to bless him in allowing him to take all these animals from Laban through this deal. I mean, God, it didn't have anything to do with striped sticks. I don't know. I mean, it worked. He thought it did, and it worked, but it wasn't because of some witchcraft. It was because God blessed him. It was because God made it work. It's because God caused all the sheep and goat to start having striped babies. I mean, that's all that it could be. So we see that throughout all this, God has blessed Jacob richly, and he leaves with his entourage and his family, and he leaves with more animals than what was left for Laban. He takes a larger number than what is left behind, and he is now one of the richest men around because God has blessed him so richly, even though he is known as a deceitful person. And to me, the things that you see, the things that Jacob is known to do would make him the kind of person that I wouldn't even want to do business with. Makes him the kind of person that I wouldn't want to deal with, or neither would you. You would always feel, have you ever bought something or went to buy something and you just felt like, I'm getting taken advantage of here. I just feel like they're taking advantage because of the people that you're dealing with. We've all heard about we all talk about used car salesmen. Every time you deal with one, you feel like you need to go home and take a bath after you deal with some of them. And that's the way you would feel like when you were dealing with somebody like Jacob, but yet God chose Jacob. I mean, we see it. He is God's choice. Now, Abraham, God had made a promise to Abraham. Abraham was known as the greatest in the land. God made a promise to him. When God made that promise to Abraham, he knew that Abraham was going to have more than one child. But yet Isaac was the one that he chose. And because of that, he knew that Isaac was going to have 2 sons. And he chose Jacob ahead of time. I mean, Esau was the stronger person. Why not choose Esau? Why choose Isaac and his children rather than Ishmael? We don't know. And that's what it boils down to, is that we wouldn't pick. Jacob would not be my pick to have been the one to bless. I mean, there's nothing about him that you see up to this point in his life that says he deserves to be blessed. But yet God makes the choice, and he says, I'm going to bless Jacob. And I'm going to choose Jacob. And then we skip all the way up to Genesis 32. And in Genesis 32 is where we see, now Esau comes out to meet Jacob. Okay? Jacob is on his way back to their homeland. He is fleeing from Laban. He can't turn back to Laban, and he's fleeing, and he's on his way back home, and he finds out that Esau is on his way out to greet him. Now, had I done what Jacob had done to Esau, I would have the same feelings that Jacob does. I would feel the same way that Jacob would. My first thought would be, he's coming to kill me. I mean, he's coming after me, and I deserve it. And Jacob knows that he's wronged Esau, and he knows that he's done wrong. So he starts sending ahead all these messengers, and he sends ahead all this stuff. But Jacob doesn't go. Not yet. It says in verse 21, so the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said to him, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to Jacob, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. Now, as we look at this, we see that Jacob, even though he had been the way he was, we see that he still got a visit from God. And you know, some think that this was an angel that he wrestled with, but this to me looks like he was actually wrestling with God. And God came in a bodily form, pre-incarnate, we call it. And he wrestled with him. And he wrestled with him not in the strength of God, but in the strength of man. And for that reason is why that he struggled. And he did not overpower him until it came time that he needed to go. And at that point, you know, just the touch of his hand on his hip, and his hip came out of joint. And it came out of socket, and he gave him a new name. And the name is fitting. The name is Israel. And why did he pick that name? Because the name means one who strives with God. And he says, "I give you this name because you have struggled with God. You have been in strife. You have wrestled with God and with men and have prevailed." But yet he also knew what Israel would become. You see, he was the father of all of Israel. And as we have studied, I mean, look at the study we've been doing in the book of Judges. Look at the way that Israel today is still in turmoil. They still strive with God. And God knew that 5,000, 4,000 years later, they would still be striving with God. And Israel has never completely turned itself over to God. Has never, and God continues to bless them, and they continue to strive with Him, and that's why He picked this name. But of all the people of Jacob's lineage, of all the people that was of Abraham's lineage, of all those people, why did He choose Jacob to be the father of Israel? We'll never know that, because that's the difference. We look at people and think, I wouldn't have anything to do with that person. We look at people and say, I wouldn't buy a car off that person, or I wouldn't deal with that person. And God chose that person to be the father of His chosen people. Why? Because God knows our character. He knows our desires. He knows our heart. And regardless of what people see and the actions that we do, God knows better. God knows better where we stand than we ourselves know. And for that reason, God chose Jacob to be His chosen one, the father of His people. And that just shows us that, you know, we'll never understand. We'll never understand why God uses the people that God uses. But every person in the Bible, every person in Scripture that God used in a mighty way, the Bible is clear to point out their flaws. There's not one person that God used that the Bible does not point out something they did wrong. And the reason for that, I believe, God didn't have to put in all the bad stuff that Abraham did. God didn't have to put in the bad things that Moses did. He didn't have to put in the bad things that these people did. But He did that to show us that God does not choose us on how good we are, but upon how reliant upon Him we are. So that for that reason, don't trust in our own selves. 2 Corinthians, I was going to get to that one, 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And that just is just a scripture that Paul told. Verse 8 says, "For we do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, of our trouble which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened beyond measure, above strength, so that we despised even our life. Yes, we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead." This scripture, along with this, it shows us that we can't trust even in ourselves, much less any other person. But here we see that Paul is talking about the fact that they are almost to the point of death. They're scared for their lives. And it's just to show us. And this scripture shows us that it's so that we won't trust in ourselves. Sometimes God takes us to the breaking point, just like He did with Jacob when he dislocated his hip, and he wouldn't even tell him who he was. But He brought him to the breaking point so that he wouldn't trust in himself or in his own strength, but so that he would trust in God. And sometimes God has to bring us to that point. But He knows what that point is, and He knows how reliant we'll be on Him. Does anybody have anything else?